Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Mr. Connor. With me, as always, Professor Phil.
Day.
Good day to you, or day. I intuited that you said good day.
Come through?
What's that?
Never mind.
Welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. We've had a wonderful time. Phil just explained just the wonderful artistry of Japanese illustrated literature and the incredibly heterosexual themes running through some big stories. So I'm in a great mood to talk about fighting, and I am not aroused at all. I just want to make that clear.
No.
Why would I be? There's nothing gay about this.
Yeah, why would you be? There's nothing gay about this sport at all.
One thing I can say now.
Yeah, being aroused by it would probably just prove that you were even more manly.
Actually, that's true. Damn. Okay,
it's
maybe
the most non-gay thing you can do.
Maybe I am horny for MMA. One thing I've learned is that MMA will never be as gay as grappler Baki. that which I honestly
very few things ever will be.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me, but that seems to be the case. We're here to talk about some UFC events. Surprise, surprise. Coming up next week, we have a travel card, a fight night card, headlined by Henry Cejudo, who is taking on Song Yadong, a very solid bantamweight fringe contenders sort of fight. Maybe unfair to even call them sidelined contenders, I suppose, but they're right up there in the pack. And so that's a great, meaningful fight, and should be an interesting one to watch. Also on this card, in the co-main event slot, Brendan Allen versus Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, a very significant fight for the middleweight division that I'm also looking forward to. The card used to be better, I gotta say. Mm-hmm. At one point in the past, it had Dominic Cruz versus Rob Font. Frankly, I have enjoyed many of Dominic Cruz's post-prime performances. I think he always still shows up and gives it his all, and I enjoy watching it, but he suffered, I believe, a calf tear and decided that's enough and finally retired. So, R.I.P. Dominic Cruz, R.I.P. that fight, to be more precise. We also lost a Curtis Blades fight. We lost Edson Barboza versus Steve Garcia. You know, it's taken some hits, but it's still better than an Apex card.
Yeah, it's still recognizably a travel card.
Yeah, although having said that, we did have a pretty damn good Apex card last week, which had some meaningful fights and also, I think, delivered on the action in the fights that mattered. So maybe we're turning a new leaf. Maybe 2025 is going to be the year where I won't say all the cards improve, because that's obviously not going to happen, but maybe it's going to be a point of such sort of negligence and lack of administrative care that Apex cards are sometimes just as good as travel cards, and travel cards are sometimes just as bad as Apex cards.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have some unpredictability.
Yeah, not just see Apex and know immediately that you don't care. That would be a good feeling, I suppose, even if half the cards still suck. Just keep us on our toes. That's all we're asking. So let's get into it. Henry Cejudo, Song Yadong, very clearly has at least the makings of a real crossroads kind of fight. Henry Cejudo has reached the top of the mountain. He's one of the most impressive, not only athletes in his division's history, but most impressive, martial arts specialists in MMA history. But it's reasonable to think that his time at the top is probably coming to a close sometime soon. Song Yadong, meanwhile, has had basically the same early career path as Weili Zhang, but he has not successfully turned into the kind of flexible, brilliant strategist that Weili Zhang has over the course of her UFC career. He's kind of just been floating in more or less the exact same spot since he got here. So could be a breakthrough performance from him. Also could be par for the course, where Song Yadong remains a guy who just cannot beat the very best people in his division.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very well-made fight.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
For kind of that reason, it's very difficult to tell what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a very good fight.
Mm-hmm. As a piece of matchmaking, I think it seems very functional. I like it.
Yeah, because I think, one of the things about Henry Cejudo that has allowed him to have incredible success throughout his career, and has, allowed him to beat some quite diverse opponents, is that he is a genuinely smart fighter.
Yeah.
He is genuinely thinking about how to beat opponents, and he often has, a very good idea of why that's going to work. He's, because there are a lot of fighters who come up with, what they think are really good, smart plans for fighting people, which are in fact not that, of which the obvious answer would be the difference between what looked like, a really clever thinking fighter in Ian Gary, in his early fights compared to his later ones.
Right.
But yeah, by and large, Cejudo has been able to assemble his game into something which makes sense for his opponents. And that is not really something you can ignore when he's fighting someone like Song Yadong. Because that is the main thing about Song Yadong, is that he's
very game plannable, isn't he?
Yeah, he's consistent to the point of solvability.
Yeah.
Every physical trait you could want: immensely tough, immensely fast, immensely strong.
Yep.
Yeah, he's essentially going to follow you around, set his feet, and swing combinations at you.
Yeah,
I try and take it.
Please go on. I was just
Oh no, go for it.
I was just going to say that I sort of see Song Yadong as analogous to Josh Emmett. Maybe not Josh Emmett now, but Josh Emmett's whole contendership, which a period which lasted many years, in which he was clearly very good and very difficult to beat, difficult to look good against for a lot of opponents, but just seemed to have one gear most of the time. One gear, a pretty limited array of ideas, lacking flexibility. That's why I brought up Zhang right at the start, because having seen what she did in her last performance and how she's grown over the course of her career as another highly touted Chinese prospect, it's just hard for me not to think of the comparison when I look at Song Yadong, who's just sort of stagnated at the elite level. The most frustrating kind of stagnation. He's just been on the cusp for this entire time.
Yep.
And I think it's similar to the problem with Josh Emmett. Maybe it's not an accident, by the way, that they are both associated in some respect with Team Alpha Male.
Yes, they are not, apart from a very short period in their history, associated much with subtlety.
Yeah, in fact, I said Song Yadong is super game plannable. That's kind of the book on alpha male fighters for much of their history, at least as far as championship fights go. Dominic Cruz made a career appearing 10 times smarter than he actually is by being able to figure out Team Alpha Male fighters who famously had no idea how to beat Dominic Cruz during that entire time. That's how Song Yadong feels. Lots of power, lots of speed, all the physical attributes are there, and the stuff that Alpha Male does well. He's got, the defensive wrestling, the scrambling ability, all of that is there, but his game plans suck. He's not flexible. He cannot change. He can't adapt in any real way from one round to the next. Song Yadong is sort of if you survive him in the first round, and you're not at a huge disadvantage in some area, you just have a pretty good chance of at least taking a decision from him. It just gets less surprising the longer the fight goes on.
Yeah, I think he's just one of those fighters, where technique is, to some extent, as it stands, is a detriment to him, because he is always on his feet. He's always, got his weight over his feet. He cannot really, but his main sort of thing is that he doesn't really have a very strong range game at all. The Yan fight was, you could see him finding a way to close the distance, and it's mostly like level changes. But he doesn't really have any other elements of his game to make that work. You know, his level change is not doing anything. It's not he's not making the mix up between a takedown and a body jab or an overhand or anything, you know.
Yeah.
Most fighters, you know, TJ Dillashaw had his kind of weird dipping head kick, or Frankie Edgar had like a whole flowchart of sequences from his level change.
Right.
But Song Yadong's level change is clearly just it's time to close the distance and I don't know how.
Yeah.
He was jabbing more against Yan, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's not much subtlety to it. He's just sticking out a jab or a naked low kick, and he's not like feinting that much or taking anything off his shots. He doesn't, that's criticism we've leveled at Jose Aldo, but he doesn't have anything like Jose Aldo's defense.
Yep.
So yeah, it often just becomes this kind of test of physicality and will.
He really is. This is what Jose Aldo would look like with zero footwork.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I see as the real cause for most of his losses at the high level. Is I would describe Song Yadong as positionally inert.
Yes.
He even strikes me as he fights like incuriously, if that makes sense. He doesn't have.
Yeah, my comparison for him would probably be less Josh Emmett than it is, because at least Josh Emmett has simple level changes.
Yeah.
For me, he's less Josh Emmett than he is Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think
Jeremy Stevens could put some nice combinations together.
Totally. Yeah.
And could, look like a genuinely quite coherent striker at points. But yeah, as soon as he made him come after people, he was just struggling tremendously.
Which, by the way, I think we are already, over the course of this conversation, discovering the makings of a pretty straightforward Henry Cejudo game plan.
Yeah.
Because the rule seems to be, as with Jeremy Stevens, almost anybody who can take advantage of the real estate, especially not being in the Apex octagon, being in a full-sized octagon, anybody who can take advantage of that space, move laterally, maintain distance, is going to have a pretty good chance of at least frustrating Song Yadong long enough that, again, he stops being sort of surprising later into the fight.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to make him reset his feet constantly. And it just works every time somebody is able to do that.
Yep.
And I said incurious before. I don't know if that's a very apt term, but it's like, if you look at Song Yadong as a military force out on campaign, he's got all the big guns. He's got the best guns. He's got all the shock troops and the assault forces. He's got no scouting. He has no scouts. Yeah. He doesn't do a good job of gathering intel. He doesn't do a good job of probing his opponent, testing angles. Like you said with the level change, what information is that meant to gather? None is what I can tell. None. He's just he'll do some random things that feel like stuff boxers and kickboxers do. But really, he is only comfortable or effective if he's allowed to stand directly in front of you. And, it doesn't, he used his jab against Petr Yan. Did it lead to any kind of positional domination of Petr Yan down the stretch? No. Because even his jab is just this very straightforward, straight line weapon. It's still a good shot to use. It's going to land a lot more easily than all your other punches because it's a jab and jabs work like that. But what's it leading to? And yeah, the answer is it's leading to a combination which only lands if you remain standing in front of him or back up in a straight line. And if you can sidestep and pivot at all, he's just going to have to continually reset his feet and try again. It's frustrating. Song Yadong is a fighter that I would really like to see change camps, if I'm honest. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has so much potential.
He's so much potential.
And it may already be too late. I mean, he's still a young man, but like Weili Zhang, he's been fighting for ages. I think they both made their pro debuts in like 2016. Let me double check that. 2013.
Wow.
He's been fighting. He had a whole career before he came to the UFC, and you know, they were mostly shitty opponents. It was the kind of building stage you see pro boxers go through, but he has not continued to improve, and maybe at this point it's too late, even though he's only 27. Maybe he's just going to be stuck in his ways forever, but it would be a shame because he still screams potential. He looks like he should be so much better than he is.
I mean, even that, you know, that Jan fight, it's still, like, it's very close. It's very competitive. It's just him getting pushed out of the fight in the same way, you know, a very similar way that to the one that he always does.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so yeah, it would be, and this is the thing, is that you can see little moments of, there are little improvements, you know, using the jab more. And because he's got such incredible potential, those little improvements immediately yield massive results. You know, the fight's instantly much closer than it would have been otherwise. And, you know, that in itself makes you you hope to see more from him the next time. But yeah, he still does seem like he's trapped in this cage of, just trapped in the cage of his own footwork. That he can't break out of, and his own over reliance in his own power. Yeah.
I was thinking of this, like, I don't know. At a certain level, it's with a lot of fighters, it is just kind of a get good proposition. Like, you just need to actually learn the skills. And I was thinking of this watching Yusuf Zalal last weekend. Yusuf Zalal tried to do to Calvin Kattar what Max Holloway did to Calvin Kattar. And he did it successfully. But the difference is that Zalal did not have Kattar's combination punching ability. Nobody does. He was not able to, like, prevent Kattar from running him over more and more as the fight went on, but he had much better survivability in that context because his defense is better than Max's. Like, and it's ropey, it's weird, he's putting himself in awkward positions, but I was thinking of this, watching that like, man, part of Max's problem is that he just doesn't have the moves. He could get put into the exact same position.
You mean Zalal's problem?
No, Max's problem. Max's problem when he's forced onto the back foot is that, like, he doesn't slip. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't slip and then roll. He can't, like, connect head movement sequences like Yusuf Zalal did in this fight. And so Zalal was able to get away with being a lot less potent than Max because he actually had layers of defense to fall back on when he was in trouble. That's a problem with Max, that as great as he is, he's gone his whole career just, like, not actually having these tools. They're just not in his toolkit. And that's the thing with Song Yadong. It's like, these things aren't just going to materialize. Like, if you want to get over this problem, you have to actually learn how footwork works. You have to understand and gain new skills. And that's all he needs, I think. He's equipped with everything else that will help him win fights. He literally just needs someone to teach him footwork, and nobody has.
Yep.
He just doesn't have the skills. He doesn't know how to pivot. He doesn't know how to, like, open somebody's stance up with his jab. He kind of knows how to cut off the cage, but it doesn't yield any results because once he starts punching, that cage cutting goes away because he has to plant his feet and fire straight ahead again. So, like, it's a solvable problem, though. Someone needs to teach him these skills. They're learnable skills. Why does he not have footwork? He just doesn't have footwork. I don't know.
Yeah.
Certain fighters just don't. Nobody's teaching them the moves. It's not like it's an inborn thing where he's incapable of, you know, pivoting to the left and then firing the 1-2. Nobody's taught him. So.
Yep. And yeah, it's, as you said, it would take him years to learn that because he would have to unlearn a bunch of his current approach, or he would have to he would have to think very hard in the cage whilst he was doing it.
It would lead to a capital T technical phase almost certainly, even if he did try to learn those skills.
Yeah.
Overcorrection.
So we've been talking about basically how he's flawed and he can be taken advantage of and all this other kind of stuff. We do have to talk about Henry Cejudo because there are two things that we obviously need to mention about Henry Cejudo. One, he is old.
Yeah.
Two, he has a giant head.
Important to note.
A really huge head.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have really any defense. And again, you can see why this has happened. It'd be very hard to have head movement when your head is that size.
Mm-hmm.
But he has never had good defense, and his concession to not having good defense has been that he's incredibly potent.
Yeah.
He's fighting old Dominic Cruz. Who cares? Does it matter if Dominic Cruz is going to hit you? No.
Yeah.
Does it matter when you hit Dominic Cruz? Absolutely. Again, it's a very smart game plan that he comes with, of cutting Cruz off and eventually killing him near the cage.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it didn't matter if Dominic Cruz hit him. Didn't really matter if Aljamain Sterling hit him. It didn't really matter if Merab Dvalishvili hit him that much.
Mm-hmm.
It will matter if Song Yadong hits him.
Yes, it will.
And Cejudo is getting hit cleanly by literally everyone he fights.
Yeah.
And he's old. And in the, this is sort of like the Dricus versus Strickland thing, is that Song is a naturally challenging matchup for Cejudo. This is not like an easy style matchup for him. This is someone who is big, who's going to be able to... So Cejudo is not going to... it's going to be much tougher for Cejudo to strand him on the outside and kick him, or to do his, karate thing, as he would be able to do perhaps more effectively against someone his own size.
Mm-hmm.
Song is just much, much bigger than him, head aside. And Song has he's an immensely potent puncher. He's a very good scrambler, and he has cat-like takedown defense.
Yeah.
He can be taken down because, again, he's
solvable.
As you said, he's solvable, and it's the footwork thing. He has to be. Yeah. He can be timed sitting down on shots, and at that point, it doesn't matter how sort of good his takedown defense is. But he does have very, very good takedown defense, and he hits really hard, and he's really accurate.
Yep.
So, all that being said, I am going to pick him. Because I think he's just going to hit Henry Cejudo a bunch. I think this might actually be quite ugly.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing... Did you get to the other thing with Henry Cejudo? He's old. Oh, and he has a big head. Third point.
Yeah, that's fine.
Third point, and maybe this is point 1A. He has been gassing in his fights lately too.
Yes. That is very true.
That's been a problem. It wasn't just against Merab. He gassed against Aljamain Sterling as well. And of course, that was his first fight back after a 3-year layoff, in which he just kept getting older and older. He's now 38 years old. And on the one hand, it probably was all the wrestling and grappling he did with those two guys that caused him to gas. On the other hand, it seems like he'd better have some wrestling and grappling against Song Yadong, because he hasn't fought a serious puncher since Marlon Moraes in 2019. And Moraes hit him with a lot of shots before he started to collapse, which was inevitable, basically.
Yes.
You gotta wonder, can he still take shots from a puncher of Moraes' caliber? Possibly a harder, if less subtle puncher than Marlon Moraes.
Yeah, my instinct is no.
Yeah.
Frankly.
I kind
of... Or
of...
at least that, even if, Song Yadong isn't going to sleep him instantly, that...
He'll win rounds with it.
I still think is doubtful. He will just be hitting him a bunch, and it will be shaking Cejudo up.
Right, exactly.
He's shaking Cejudo up like multiple times per round.
Yeah. Having said that, as I suggested earlier, Cejudo is going to try to run him out of real estate, right? He's going to try to circle him and make him reset his feet and frustrate him and pot shot him. And it might work to a significant extent.
Yeah. I mean, Yadong has not had the greatest cardio himself.
No. Yeah, it's not bad.
Fights that go late.
Considering how much power he puts into everything he does, I think his cardio is actually quite good. But he totally slows down, and it also just feels like he slows down because of the thing we mentioned earlier, that he just you get surprised by his speed, but no matter how fast he is, sooner or later you adjust to it, and then it gets into the realm of what ideas is he able to come up with to try to hit me, and the answer is not many. It's just the speed and the intensity. Yep. So yeah, I also feel this could be quite ugly. Possibly Song Yadong will try to even the odds against the neutralizing style I expect from Cejudo with a lot of leg kicks. These were pretty...
I think they're both going to use quite a lot of kicking, to be honest.
Yeah. I only bring it up because it was fairly effective for Marlon Moraes against Cejudo. But yeah, Cejudo likes to low kick as well.
I think that's going to be one of his kicking game will be his concession to the sort of range and potency that Song poses.
Yeah, probably. But he has been chewed up by leg kicks in the past on the few occasions when he's faced somebody who's stuck to that weapon. The Moraes one is the key example. Yeah, I think I'll take Song Yadong too. Largely a youth pick.
Has to be, right?
Yeah, but boy, it's probably going to be very frustrating to watch after a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I can even trust Cejudo to be able to, like, get away from that much. Like, I mean, he's rarely really had, like, a super boring back foot fight, or at least not for a long time.
Yeah, but Song Yadong is uniquely susceptible to lateral movement. It just fucks up his whole game. He needs you to stay standing.
Cejudo is uniquely hittable as well.
It's true. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I just think even having the bare bones neutralizing approach, it will yield some frustrating results against Song Yadong. He just doesn't know how to deal with it. He literally 100%. Does not have the footwork. Like, that is not an understatement. He doesn't understand footwork. Nobody's taught him.
Yeah, it'll be super ironic if this ends up being like the Cruz fight, where he's just like pecking away at him, and then eventually he just gets, it's mostly sort of going okay, and then he just gets trapped against the fence,
gets
and
nuked,
instantly obliterated.
Yeah, it could happen. I could see it happening.
Yep.
All right. Well, Song Yadong is the pick with some reservations.
Good fight.
Yeah.
Well made.
Great fight. It makes perfect sense. Like I said, I just want to see, you can only give a guy like Song Yadong so many of these perfectly made fights, before it's like, okay, are you actually going to show what we need you to show if we give you another one? I want to see him not just nuke Henry Cejudo. I want to see him demonstrate that he can handle Henry Cejudo. I want to see him demonstrate that he can win rounds without just having to hurt Henry really badly. Like, if he comes into this unprepared for the long range karate shit and starts to get frustrated, that to me, it's almost like that just closes the book on Song Yadong. Like, at this point, it's so long into his career, despite his youth. When is he going to figure this shit out? And it's way too late already to be talking about when are you going to learn footwork. Too late. So I'm hoping against hope that he shows something other than all the stuff we've known Song Yadong possesses since he got to the UFC. Now, 6-7 years ago? How long has he been in this organization? Debuted in 2017.
Yep.
And he's just been stagnant that whole time.
Well, some technical improvements.
He's added some stuff, yeah, but he's been struggling with the same core problems that whole time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break there. When we return, Brendan Allen versus Fluffy Hernandez, a very compelling co-main event for this Fight Night card. After that, we're going to try to get into a little bit of what happened last week, which for this episode probably just means Cannonier Rodriguez, and maybe touching on one other. Maybe we'll get some bonus content in there as well. But all of that remains to be seen. Hernandez versus Allen after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about some middleweights. Brendan Allen versus Anthony Hernandez. Allen had, I think, the longest winning streak in the middleweight division, right up until his last fight when he sort of got out-grappled by Nasruddin Imavov. Which, if that isn't an indictment of the division Brendan Allen was quote-unquote dominating up to that point, I don't know what is. But clearly a very difficult test to handle for the vast majority of middleweights. I'm going to say, sight unseen, Anthony Hernandez is not poised to struggle with Brendan Allen the same way other middleweights do. Well,
yeah, this is
I'm having second thoughts having just said that, but yeah, you go first, and then we'll get into it.
This is a well booked fight, right?
Yeah, it occurs to me that it is. I had a very simple read, and then the moment I thought about it, I thought, Anthony Hernandez doesn't really out-grapple people because he's a much better grappler than them.
Right.
It's because he wears them the fuck out. And Brendan Allen's superpower is that he will fucking grapple with anybody and be kind of oftentimes positionally superior to them on the ground.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that both of these guys have basically made like shockingly good careers for themselves. At least partially just by being incredibly gritty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's equal parts grit and being like middleweights that can actually grapple.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily like wrestle super well, either one of them. But that doesn't matter because as of the moment, no one in the middleweight division can really wrestle. Apart from Amzat and maybe Bo Nickel, sort of.
Let's not even put Bo Nickel in that company.
Yeah.
We really have no idea. We have no idea how good Bo Nickel's grappling is as of yet. He wasn't even courageous enough to test it against Paul Craig. So,
yes, I mean his grappling. We saw him getting essentially coached through. Was it an arm triangle by his corner?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, these guys are both actually good grapplers.
Yeah,
and which means that they've been able to essentially cleanse the division of other grapplers who have relied on grappling as a superpower that can simply win them fights because no one's ready for it. So they fought, like, respectively, Andre Muniz and early career Rodolfo Vieira.
Yeah.
And those guys were both like, well, I can presumably just submit everyone in this division. And they fought both of them and got knackered and destroyed.
They make these actual dangerous submission hunters look like gimmick fighters.
Yeah. Because their whole style is built around essentially staying in the fight and wearing you out.
Right. Both willing. Allen doesn't break people with pace quite the same way Hernandez does. Like I said, he comes through against these grapplers by just gaining top position on them and grinding them from there. in a much more patient kind of way, but the end results for both of these guys are very similar, right? That they tend to they effectively can put a pace on more specialized grapplers with in Allen's case, like a bog standard MMA grappling game. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Half guard.
And that Allen
takes.
is also an okay striker.
Yeah, he's super tough and he's willing, which is more or less exactly the same for Anthony Hernandez, right? But
yep.
If anything, Anthony Hernandez is a slightly worse striker than Brendan Allen, but more insistent on his pace as a rule. Much more insistent, in fact. Allen is way too willing to take the back foot against an aggressive opponent. Hernandez has one way of fighting, and that is to drown you. So it makes his striking feel slightly more effective, but he gets hit a shitload en route to most of his wins. His striking is full of holes.
Yeah. So that's why I find this one tough.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hernandez's win condition is one which has not really worked against Brendan Allen, which is that which is that Hernandez will essentially soak up damage until he can get a takedown, and then his opponent will disintegrate.
Yep.
But also, like, Allen doesn't have any of the stylistic directionality of Hernandez, like you said. Like, he's just kind of there, and he's assuming that if we fight, you will eventually lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does seem quite planless a lot of the time, doesn't he?
Yeah. So I have to wonder, which one of these fighting, which one do I value more? At the moment, I'm not sure, because my instinct is obviously the same as yours, which is to go for Anthony Hernandez. He makes so much more sense as a fighter. He has a very well-defined,
just has a winning style, just...
Yeah. And it's all built from A to B to C. It's not very, it's a rocky road to get there.
Yeah.
But, he strikes into the clinch, he gets you down, and then he's got, just this very potent, very draining riding top game.
Yeah.
Whereas Allen, it's I'm going to kickbox with you, and then if you take me down, I'm going to sweep you. Which is...
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't work nearly as well as it does.
Yeah. Again, equal parts a testament to Allen's overall grappling ability and the weird, scattershot specialization of fighters in this division.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when Allen is actually trying to get takedowns, we saw how that worked against Nasruddin Imavov. Not that Imavov is a bad grappler, he's not. But, this is particularly concerning against Hernandez. The number of front headlocks Allen dove directly into against Imavov, which is a thing. He's going to be forced to shoot, right, if Hernandez's pressure is allowed to build.
Yep.
Which it seems very likely that it will. And shooting into a front headlock against Anthony Hernandez is particularly dangerous. He has an excellent front headlock submission series that he finishes a lot of people with. Particularly that deep arm-in Schultz headlock style guillotine. But okay, I'm talking myself back around to thinking that Anthony Hernandez is the de facto pick.
That's the thing. I kind of feel like I have to pick him.
Yeah,
and I'm just what if Allen just outstrikes him?
Yeah, but how's he going to do that? What is Hernandez's problem as a striker? The process works. He puts pressure on over and over and over and over until he gets you to a corner and forces you to tie up. That's and what are the problems with that approach? He's incredibly hittable. But what does he have to worry about from Brendan Allen as far as hittability is concerned? Allen is not a puncher.
He has to worry about the fact that he's at some point he's going to overcommit into a takedown. And that Allen will simply convert that into a sweep and top position.
Yeah. Could be.
I fully expect Allen to just back straight up into the cage in this fight.
Exactly. And is Allen hitting?
He doesn't have any direction to his fights, and Hernandez does, and so he will accept that, and he'll be backed into the cage almost instantly.
Yeah, and is Allen hitting his impressive sweeps on people being taken down against the cage? That's not normally where his grappling nimbleness actually comes through.
Yeah.
Those are positions where Anthony Hernandez lets you half escape and then rides you in that position until you want to die. Or until you actually die, whichever comes first, I suppose.
Yep.
So
I feel like I probably still do have to pick Hernandez. I mean, I can't really make myself pick Allen, but he is one of those fighters. He's just like Dricus, where his success doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He's just a very tough person who manages to outlast people in a somewhat limited division a lot of the time. And Hernandez is many things, but he is also quite limited himself. So I can't pick him with confidence, but I do have to pick him because I know what he's going to try and do, and I think it's going to work.
Yeah,
at least somewhat.
Allen's well-rounded. He's game everywhere. He's just a really resourceful grappler too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment in that Imavov fight where he gets fully back-mounted by Imavov and then gets 2-on-1, works the arm to the other side of the head, and ends the round in top position. Just escapes straight out of back mount like that. He is not somebody who ever agrees to just give up a bad position, ever. But again, that's kind of part of the process of how Hernandez beats you. Nobody agrees to give up the bad position at first. They keep fighting, and he lets you fight. And then he sticks to you like glue and lets you fight up again and again. And eventually you're just like, well, maybe I'll try a little guard play because that sucked. I don't want to do that anymore. And that's the downward spiral.
Yeah, I don't think he doesn't have an elite skill set.
Nope.
He does have an elite process.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, in a way, this is still another opportunity. Allen has just come through amazingly well against fellow grapplers in the middleweight division. And once again, this does look like an opportunity where his actual skill on the ground may prove a good answer to Hernandez's kind of blunt instrument process.
Mm-hmm.
But
this is a genuinely very well booked fight.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. Do not hate it. Both of us picking Fluffy Hernandez. Both of us not entirely sure about it. It's a good sign when you can say that about the top two fights in the card. I'm not exactly sure how this will go.
I definitely am not.
I care and I'm confused. That's a good place to be as a fight fan. All right, well, let's take one more break then. And when we come back, although there is some other stuff on this card that would be worth talking about, I want to talk about some of the results from last week's surprisingly meaningful Apex event. So after this, we'll come back to talk about Cannonier versus Robocop Rodriguez.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about this Apex card. What do you think overall? It's always hard. It's hard for me to tell because yeah, good experience. Did you watch it? Well, you didn't watch it live either, so we both have the same kind of experience, don't we? It's always curious to talk to Zane because Zane tends to watch the events live, and he frequently has a more negative opinion than me, which is a surprise because I'm a cynical motherfucker. But a lot of these UFC events benefit from watching after the fact when you can skip all the bullshit, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because this wasn't it wasn't an end-to-end banger of a card, let's be honest.
Yeah, right. Although
I think the entire main card was interesting.
Yeah. And at one of those ends that you mentioned, certainly not a banger, but I like Jacqueline Cavalcanti. I think she's a really interesting, maybe the only interesting women's bantamweight prospect. And I did enjoy seeing her just sort of easily solve Julia Avila. So even in the non-exciting fights, there were some meaningful results sprinkled throughout this card.
Damn, you watched this card. I
didn't watch. There's some that I missed.
I wasn't like I'm. Oh man, there's a women's bantamweight fight between people I've never heard of.
Yeah. Well, this is the vivisection effect. I know who she is because I've been following her, not by any choice of my own. But the result of that is that I like her. She's a cool, interesting, like principled boxer, basically, at women's bantamweight, and she's got a young veteran vibe, relatively inexperienced, but she fights in a really classy, educated way. So, if I didn't do the vivisection, I wouldn't have watched that fight either. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know who she was.
I have a heuristic now which I follow, which is don't watch women's bantamweight fights unless you have to.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
At least part, because most of them nowadays are simply going to be reduxes of fights that we've already seen between the exact same people.
Yeah, too true.
7 years ago.
Too true. But I did watch that one. I skipped some of the other ones throughout the card, but I think I saw all the ones that I was interested in, which, as another recommendation for the quality of this card was, 5 or 6 of these fights. Not bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, let's talk about this main event. Jared Cannonier, Gregory Rodriguez. I think we both.
This is what you need to, really make the difference, right? You need
a good finish.
A main event, which is great. This was great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, did we both pick Jared?
Yeah.
Well done. Well done to you, Phil. Here, I'll pat myself on the back, but just know that this is actually for you.
Yeah. Well done, you too, Connor.
Thanks. That feels great.
Great analysis.
Okay, enough rubbing. Stop. This was, I think, arguably a contender for Johnson versus Elkins, was it not?
Yeah.
Jared Cannonier, the sort of aimless problem solver, the unstrategic tactician, figuring out over the course of a fight how to beat a guy who goes 100% until pieces start to fly off and he falls apart.
Yep.
Also, by the way, I didn't read it, but it's a possible contender for post-fight rationalization because I saw some headline where Gregory Rodriguez was blaming his weight cut for the loss. And I'm going to go ahead and say, maybe you had a bad weight cut. In fact, I believe that you did. You're a big-ass middleweight. But this is how a lot of your losses look. So
yeah, it looked the most characteristic Gregory Rodriguez fight I've ever seen.
Exactly. So I don't think this specific weight cut was the real issue in how you just seem forever doomed to be unaware of what pacing even is.
Yeah, but yeah, this was cool and. Even though I kind of picked Cannonier to win, I think I probably wanted Cannonier to win.
Yeah.
It was satisfying to see him win, not in the way that you might have expected, which is that, or one of the ways that you could expect, which is that Rodriguez would simply overextend early and that Cannonier would instantly sweep him, as has happened several times in Rodriguez's career. Like you said, we got to see some of that actual, that problem solving.
Yeah.
That Cannonier's kind of capable of coming up with. You get to be reminded that he has actually beaten some genuinely pretty good middleweights and has,
he is a good middleweight, yeah.
Yeah. Up to and including former champion Sean Strickland.
Future champion at the point, so that one aged really well. Now we know just how good Sean Strickland really is.
Mm-hmm.
It was very characteristic of Cannonier, not just in the positive, because he did come up with the entries. I mean, Cannonier discovered the jab about 6 minutes into this fight and just started winning with it. It was also characteristic in that in the midst of all of this clever adjusting and problem solving, he was also doing all kinds of shit that had me screaming at the screen. Like, stop! Just keep doing the stuff that's working. Why do you keep going southpaw? He just makes an arbitrary decision to switch to southpaw like after every fourth exchange. Even though it is the orthodox jab, which is starting to dominate this fight for him, he's like, well, I'm bored of that. Let's try something else. That's a very Jared Cannonier thing too, unfortunately. Just can't stick to a winning plan. Even if he does find all the right adjustments, he can't incorporate that into a real framework for how to best continue winning the fight. It reminded me of light heavyweight kickboxer Justin Jacoby against Alonzo Menefield. He kept doing the same shit. He was wrecking Menefield with his jab, but then he would get Menefield cornered and he'd be like, okay, well, the jab's landed 5 times. There's no way it's going to keep working. I should go southpaw now.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Stop switching stance. Why do MMA fighters have this addiction to switching stance for no reason? They just think, oh, this will be tricky. I'll abandon the thing that was working and put myself in a position where I'm almost certainly more defensively vulnerable. Great. So that frustrated.
He'll never see it coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I suddenly just decide to start being worse.
Yeah. So it frustrated me a bit en route to the win, but all things considered, I thought this was a sort of a classic win that speaks to why Cannonier has been a contender in this division for so long now. He's not easy to just, he may get away from the stuff that keeps working, but the same stuff doesn't just keep working against him very often either.
Yeah.
So, he's
one of those fighters who I think, he just has like a good combination of like mental traits to make him competitive.
Yeah.
That he is absolutely never going to give up on himself, and he's never going to give up, like, looking for a way to win.
Yeah.
I think, Jack Hermansson is like this. I think Hermansson is obviously, in some ways, both technically and physically prevented from that being from him being able to, like, go higher in the division than he has been. With Cannonier, it is pretty much just, technically.
Yeah.
But yeah, both of those guys are absolutely never going to give up on themselves, and they are never going to stop trying to find ways to win.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Fluffy Hernandez has an elite process. Both of these guys have, they do have in their own way, they have elite, like, winners' mentalities.
Totally. Yeah, we talked about that last week. Cannonier is brave and poised. He doesn't freak out. He remains calm. It makes him a pretty reliable comeback artist. Even if they're not always shocking, like, definitive comebacks like this is not the first time Cannonier has gotten better later in the fight. It happens routinely. So.
Yeah, and he's also, able to just shut people out of fights like Calvin Gastelum or Marvin Vittori, that other, more well-known fighters have struggled with. Yeah.
I was particularly pleased with myself to have called one aspect of this. I'm particularly pleased because it was in a disagreement with Zane Simon, and I'm always happy to be.
That son of a bitch.
Always happy to be correct when Zane Simon is wrong. By the way, Phil, on that note, I found this very sweet and endearing. There was somebody in the comments last week who was like, I was only half listening. Is there some beef with Zane?
Yes, always.
Like, are they mad at Zane? So he's like, no, it's a gag they've been doing forever. It barely constitutes a joke at this point. It's so played out. And they were like, oh, good. They were relieved. So, yeah, there is a beef with Zane. He's a piece of shit, but, a respectable piece of shit all the same. But he was talking about, Cannonier's age, of course. And he was saying he thinks Cannonier is slowing down and that Cannonier isn't knocking people out. And I just consulted the record, and I was like, who are the knockoutable guys Cannonier has been fighting? Kyle Bahalio, maybe we didn't know how great his chin was before that fight, but if you go into it with the assumption that Cannonier has huge power, it seems pretty obvious Bahalio has a granite chin.
Also, yeah, if you just watch it, like
he's taking
just
massive
getting hit
shots,
by giant heaters. Yeah,
yeah. Marvin Vettori, Sean Strickland, like these are not knockoutable fighters. Even Israel Adesanya when he fought him. Israel Adesanya has historically
Kelvin Gastelum.
Gastelum, right?
Who he beat the living shit out of.
Yeah, he knocked out Derek Brunson. He hurt Robert Whittaker. All the guys he's supposed to be hurting, he was hurting. He was just fighting a bunch of really durable motherfuckers. And it was nice to see that not only did he still have the hand speed, he still had more than enough power to get Gregory Rodriguez out of there. So yeah, I don't think Cannonier is...
I just like the way he was, converting his forward pressure into clinches and then breaking off.
Yeah.
Always with a strike. Whether it was a knee or an elbow.
Fantastic.
Just very nice. And also, once again, reminded me that the MMA Lab just produces consistently the nicest, the nicest fighters.
You mean personally?
Yeah, they just seem like it just seems like one of the more the most wholesome team.
Yeah.
In like MMA, because he was like just giving like shout outs to his coaches afterwards, saying that they were the reason why he'd done any of this, and then they were talking to him about Angie Hill, and he was like, "Yeah, Black Don't Crack, she should be in the Hall of Fame." Like, he's just seems like he's a super weird, intense guy, but he was very nice.
I agree. That's my read on Cannonier as well. He's definitely a weirdo, but I think he's a pretty benevolent weirdo, much like another MMA Lab fighter, Benson Henderson. It's that Bendo got into God and Jared got into crystals. Same thing, really.
Yep. Yeah, but also being able to have a tolerance for weirdos is a good quality as well. But yeah, so Bendo was an MMA champion who would still be in the corner of everyone.
Totally.
So, yeah. Just seems like a nice gym.
Yeah,
and,
but also
obviously saying this. It obviously means that it's actually a cult. It's going to be exposed as like the darkest, most horrific thing ever to happen in MMA. But at least I'll have this time of thinking, MMA Lab fighters. They seem nice.
And I just have a ton of respect for John Crouch as a coach. I have for a long time. I think he. In addition to producing a bunch of fighters who seem like genuine nice guys, he routinely produces really well-rounded fighters who are, I think the thing with Cannonier not being able to strategize is a particular problem of his. I just think he gets lost in the sauce and takes his eye off the prize. But as a rule, John Crouch's fighters have the technical flexibility to adapt themselves to a lot of different game plans.
Yeah, he doesn't teach. I don't think they generally have tremendous striking fundamentals, but they're very good MMA fighters.
Totally, they all have incredible scrambling ability. That's something that they do super well at that camp. Even like the low level
transitional offense. Every MMA Lab fighter is good. In the clinch.
Totally.
As we saw at the end of this fight.
Yeah, so unfortunately, nothing new learned here about Gregory Rodriguez. He just, he's a lot of fun. In this case, though, it wasn't even the hyper fixation on offense that undid him. It was, not in the way it sometimes does, where he gets cracked. It was much more similar to the Jin Young Park fight, where he just couldn't. Although he won that one, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it was close. He started to fall apart at a certain point, and then he just kind of came back and started hammering Jin Young Park because he just blows his wad early. He cannot pull it back and take heat off of his punches. And he just gassed.
The other thing was that. Yes, the Cannonier physicality, I think, and probably the weight cut as well to some extent, meant that he couldn't kind of keep up with him, and the aggression dropped off a cliff after round one. But it also meant that he couldn't shoot any takedowns to give himself, or he couldn't get any top position to give himself a break either.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure he would have loved to do that.
Yeah, so it just slid downhill.
Yeah, but props to Cannonier. He discovered the jab and basically just built a whole lot of very effective pressure off of it, with a couple hiccups where he just decided to switch stance for no reason.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that means that's all we have for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. So find us on the social media platforms. Twitter, at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil. At Boxing Bush. That's me. Blue Sky, I'm at King Typo. Check out the Heavy Hands Patreon. We might have some stuff coming for you this week. In fact, we definitely will have some stuff coming for you from the Cannonier Rodriguez undercard that did not fit in this main episode. And next week, we'll be back both to look back on the Cejudo versus Song results and also to look forward to Manel Kape versus Asu Almabayev. I mean, I'm interested.
What?
I don't know if it'll be good. What?
Is it what now?
Manel Kape Asu Almabayev. That's the main event.
Yes. Okay. Cool. I'm glad they're doing flyweights.
Yeah, sure. At least on that front. It had to be Manel Kape, though, didn't it? That had to be the flyweight they main evented with. The guy who is 50% likely to just have a dog shit fight with almost anybody.
Well, you can see from the MVP thing is that they will simply book people based on their high points.
Yeah. They see Manel Kape the same way they see MVP, as like a highlight machine. And somehow they're unaware of the fact that 90% of his fights tends to be nothing happening. Unless he fights somebody super aggressive, in which case he is incredibly exciting to watch. But only if they insist on bringing the fight to him at every opportunity.
Yes, they have to be the most suicidal action fight.
Exactly. Yeah, they have to be recklessly aggressive. And then Manel Kape is a blast to watch. But we will see. All right, that's for next week. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
Evil Greg Jackson, Boxing Bush.
I said that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it way back? Was it so far back in the outro that I'd forgotten we got distracted by other stuff?
I mean, I definitely rambled a bit, as I want to do, but it was no more than a minute and a half back.
Okay. My apologies.
Just don't listen to me.
What?